Well, hello there. It's with a certain degree of pleasure that in this moment of relative calm, as I'm actually alone in the car as I record this, and I'm never alone in the car or anywhere else really, it's with a certain degree of pleasure that I recognize that we can chat a little bit about our recent completion of the longest New Year's Eve in the history of France. Okay. We completed in 7 sessions a intensely fun and very challenging all-for-one Régime Diabolique adventure with our musketeers, punctuated by a 2-year hiatus, almost to the day. That was not our fault, and that we struggled against, we railed against, we rallied against, and yet could not overcome for 2 years. But we did overcome it in the end. And much had changed in our lives since the hiatus. But the familiarity and the camaraderie of the game worked its magic once again. One of the other big changes is that we added in a new musketeer. Eloy joined us, and as we expected, fit right in. And his musketeer, Armand, I liked how he was brought in. He had been a part of our inner circle, we said, and we had been denied the pleasure of his company for lo these many years while he was at the front, which in musketeer language is kind of code for he was operating under a certain amount of disfavor. Right, he'd been sent to the front to get him away from people in power. And there could be any number of reasons which have not entered play yet. I don't even know if they've entered Eloy's mind yet. So he could have been sent to the front, or he could have requested to go to the front as an effort to cover himself with glory, and upon his return to the capital, be in a better position socially or within the ranks of the musketeers. We don't know. But Armand is a very capable social warrior and a very competent musketeer who, unlike Phillipe and Martin and Alphonse, seems to be exemplary as a musketeer, while the rest of us seem to be either hiding in or surviving in the musketeers. While we are 100% dedicated to our duty as musketeers, we don't seem to have been 100% dedicated to developing our skills as musketeers. So that's very, very interesting, and I really like the interplay of these different characters. So, much like the original musketeers in the works of Dumas, I find that there are shadings and reflections of each of the characters in the other characters. They're not 4 distinct characters with no overlap. There are elements of each in each. And so it's nice to see that that pattern also proving to be true in this mix of fictional musketeer characters. Well, it had been our habit at the time that we had begun this session to try our best to finish in one. We were each running a one session long thing. That was the conceit. That was our culture of play. Now, very often for one reason or another, one schedule reason or another, we would have to end early, and so it would require an additional session. So very often these one-shots were run over 2 sessions. To go for 7 sessions is unprecedented, but in the 2-year hiatus, one of the things that we talked about was that it was time to step away from the one-shot format and step into opportunities for the players and for the game master to, explore an idea more fully. So it doesn't have that rushed feel, and so that there can be more or greater modulation of the stakes, and we can work with the very expansive and yet also very subtle tapestry of non-player characters and their agendas, which have grown up since we started so long ago with this campaign, Lights and Darkness. So I'm quite excited by that. I don't know if they will all go 7 sessions. That's something. That's each session was about 2 hours long. Some of them were 3 hours long. Some of them were 90 minutes. But anyway, we're looking at a fairly lengthy amount of time with what I think initially was conceived of as, as a one-shot. I think initially it had a lot of layers because that's the nature of this campaign. There's so many layers and opportunities for it to draw on. But I think ultimately it was discover a plot, foil the plot, celebrate. I think maybe that was the original idea, but the dice had a lot to say. The first few sessions were marked by a lot of failure. Enough failure that we considered changing our conventions of play. One of the optional rules in Ubiquity is the notion of if your character is so skillful that they have more than 10 dice to bring to a particular challenge, then to prevent you from having to collect all of those dice and so waste time. Ubiquity is very much about being fast and streamlining the process without sacrificing the process, like without just hand-waving the process. So it recommends that if you have a die pool greater than 10 dice, you only roll the dice in excess of 10, and you take the average on the 10 dice, meaning you take 5 successes and then add the rest. So we haven't been doing that from the beginning. From time to time, I recommended it as a game master, but people wanted to roll their mittfuls of dice. But I tell you, by the time we'd gotten through the second session of rolling 12 to, there are some situations where I'm rolling 19 dice in this episode and getting 2 successes or 3 successes. I mean, it's just preposterous. It's the sort of results that make you wonder, is there something wrong with my dice? Like, do I have to change the batteries in these things? What's going on? So we all felt it. We were all experiencing it, that we weren't even rolling the average most of the time. And that was interesting. That certainly created a lot of threat and challenge, and it pushed the characters into decisions that would not have been made without that experience. So it was a very valuable experience. But at the same time, continual failure will wear out its welcome. So we talked about it and decided to start using that optional rule. And that swung things the other way, showing our characters as being, extremely competent. But this also is a bit of a revelation, because in Philippe's case, he has several important die pools that he has worked up over time to, be significantly larger than 10 dice. So these are his. They're on his sheet. In Martin's case, where he is a more broadly developed character, not a focused character, but a broadly developed character, which is difficult to do in Ubiquity, particularly the way we've been playing it, so I'll get to that later. None of his die pools are that high without his magical enhancements, the blessings with which he girds himself in his battle. So the great sacrifice that Martin makes, of course, is time. Right? We have this understanding that Martin is harried. He goes from his duty shift to the church, and he spends all this time in prayer and in planning and in contemplation, because at any time, and this has been brought forward in several of our adventures down through the years, at any time he could be attacked or become the subject of a plot from any angle. It could be, an attempt at physical assassination. It could be, something more mystical or magical. It could be entirely supernatural. So, you're not paranoid if people really are out to get you. And so, he is dedicated to warfare, but the only way that he can even compete in this particular war is to enhance himself magically. And what was particularly frightening about this particular episode was the clock was ticking. So it's New Year's Eve, and New Year's Eve is happening on, I can't remember now, it's been a couple of weeks since we played the last session, but let's say it's happening on a Tuesday, right? So New Year's Day is Wednesday, and those are very important days for his magical enhancements, which last a week. And so he prays for hours and hours and hours, involving himself in this religious-based magical practice. And it takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours of prayer for him to be able to create these enhancements that last for a week. And so as Tuesday winds down toward Wednesday, these enhancements begin to disappear. And if this had taken us deep into Wednesday, pretty much everything that he was relying on to be a capable combatant in this adventure would have disappeared as well. And so with the threat level rising, there are these demonic creatures running loose that have the capacity to numb your limbs and kind of swallow you whole, and there are actual cultists running around, and there are clones of some of our recurring enemies, duplicates, doppelgangers of some of our recurring enemies that we keep meeting everywhere, so we keep having to defeat them over and over and over again. The desperation begins to rise. And the only way for Martin and Phillipe to deal with it, when it's just the two of them before Armand shows up, is for Martin to risk doing some overt magic. Huge risk in a time period and in a country where, you can expect the Inquisition. So I've been very, very, very careful about revealing the magic. We'd played for over a year. We played many sessions. We'd gone through multiple cycles before Martin reveals that he too has learned the magic of the Martel witch cult to his companions, to his best friends. So that's how paranoid he has been. Well, now they are in on the secret, but he still has kept his magical abilities under wraps so that, he doesn't bring the wrath of the church down upon himself, of course, but on his friends, right? But this situation was so desperate that there really was no choice. This wasn't a joyful embrace of, "Ha, look what I can do." It was, "Oh crap, we're gonna die, so I have to do this. I hope no one's watching." And so with the arrival of Armand, our physical fighting seemed to be bolstered, but yet there was this insidious hand of failure working on the dice, and which persisted even after we started taking the average on the first 10 dice. Still, there was this strong resistance from the opposition. So it was really satisfying to come up against these situations where you know that there's a risk, but you're not sure how much of a risk. And so the decision making was delicious, and the opportunity to experience the character situation, the opportunity to portray the character situation, and the easy comfort and connection with both the players on a player level and the characters in an in-play level, it was just so rewarding. It was just fun and satisfying, like a delicious meal to get back into it. Well, it ended up with a huge change in the campaign. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I recommend that if you want to know what this huge change is and you have not yet watched the conclusion to the New Year's Eve situation, that you watch it, because it's a monumental, massive shift for any all-for-one Regime Diabolique campaign. And it's just like the bottom dropping out of your world. It's amazing. So while it ends with a certain amount of success, we uncovered the plot that was being perpetrated. We uncovered the plotters who were perpetrating the plot. We managed to get where we needed to go, sometimes early, sometimes late, sometimes right on time. And we managed not to embarrass ourselves too badly in our mix of knowing what is going on with not knowing what is going on. And so managed to foil the plot, and Martin got a little bit closer to his revenge. Haha. But with that came an incredible discovery, which I'm really looking forward to how that sends the campaign in a new direction, or strengthens the direction it had been traveling in. So it's really exciting. So this brings everybody together, and it shifts the balance of everything, where there had been a period in the campaign where, because of all of the NPCs that have been created and all the things that those NPCs were trying to do in the environment in which we are operating and the characters that were created, it kind of put a spotlight, a very direct focus on Martin as kind of the focal point of all the nastiness going on around us. But with this new revelation, we are all, in that cyclone together equally. And so that's really exciting for me. So the next thing that will happen, which if you have watched any of them before, is that as this completes Francois' run in our cycle, that he will receive a solo adventure. I don't know when that will happen. Hopefully soon, because I just anticipate the enjoyment so much. But Ivan will be going next. The next GM in our rotation is Ivan, so he'll run the solo session for Francois, and then Ivan will run an adventure, and it will take as long as it takes, right? So we're no longer looking at them as one-shots. We're looking at them as adventures, let's say, and whether that's a mission or whether that's a self-directed thing or a complicated situation, a serious situation. I don't know. So that will be fun. And then, who knows what will happen next. But, as I was saying, it was incredibly satisfying to get back into All for One Regime Diabolique, my favorite among the Ubiquity games to play. And, it's got some fierce competition now. We've been having so much fun with Leagues of Adventure with our Sky is No Limit campaign. And there's also Leagues of Gothic Horror, which I have like 1,000 things swirling in my head to do with. And then Leagues of Cthulhu, where, my heart is definitely situated these days. And, so much stuff. And each of these games has so many layers, like a more action-oriented Leagues of Gothic Horror or Leagues of Cthulhu, or really dark ones, or, somewhere in the middle. There's just so many things to do with them, and so many interesting adaptations or additions to Ubiquity with them. But still, this particular mix of players, this game, the setting that has grown up around our play, it's gripping stuff. It's the reason why you are a role player, I think. And so I want to thank my companions for getting up at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning in order to make play possible with my ridiculous schedule. And, all for one for all.